안녕하세요. Rafthani Battle Tano here, and we're back. We are officially back. It's been a minute since I last did this. I got caught up in a lot of things, a lot of gangs, a lot of not great things. But you know, I killed them all. I did it. I eliminated crime. And now I can get back to my true passion, which is looking at your opinions and telling you my thoughts on them. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Commander Jacob has graciously given me a lot of top 5 battles from certain series and community members. So the first one is of his own battles. There's Herobrine versus Mario Silhouette, Boomer versus Blooper. You can read the list yourself. It's on screen. Honestly, the only thing I gotta personally say is I'm a sucker for Barry versus Barry, so I probably would have added that, and that's the thing that jumps out most to me. Next is from DRB, and the one that stands out most here to me is McMahon versus Barnum. Most people wouldn't put that in their top 5. I'm actually glad you put it. I do like that battle a lot. I do think it's top 5 worthy. What I don't think is as top 5 worthy is Bubble Bass versus Anton Ego. I know some people really, come into defense for that battle. I personally not as much, but maybe I just don't have that much personal attachment to SpongeBob. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a top 5. If anything, probably number 5. I think number 2 is a bit high. Next up is Fight Marker. I don't really disagree with anything from this list. If anything, I think Goku versus Garfield I personally like a bit less than both Dead Meat versus Nostalgia Critic and Eric versus Frank. I get that ranking Eric versus Frank as a normal battle, like, it doesn't work. Goku versus Garfield, I would probably place lower. I think this was made before Ryan Higa versus Ray William Johnson, which I also think is a contender for that to be in top 5. I might even replace Goku versus Garfield with that. Not in this exact order, but I'd put it in there. For Dustin's list, this is a very interesting list. I haven't seen this collection of battles in someone's top 5 before, so I'll give you points for uniqueness. The rock, paper, scissors battle, that feels a little biased, considering you are in it. I think it's really good. I do think it gets a lot of flack. I think, if anything, the James Gunn verse is the one that probably brings it down, obviously. I don't know if it's top 5 of all time. I think Patrick versus Piper on here, pretty unique take. I do like that battle. I respect the fuck out of that. Same with Burton versus Tarantino. I like that battle a lot too. I'm glad to see it's on your top 5 list. Knuckles versus Undyne gets a boost because of the video, I think. I have to assume. But that's fair. And I think the performances are also really strong. So not to discredit it too much, but I do think it's a bit high here. Here's his list for Eddie. Yeah, for the most part, I think this is a valid top 5 list, yeah. Lo-Fi versus Cassette, I do think, I went and looked at my overall rankings for Battle of the Month. I still think that's my highest ranked battle overall. I've gone back to it a couple times. It's amazing. Wario Apparition versus Herobrine, I like a lot less than most people. I would put Tricky versus Springtrap over it easily. I would put Tricky versus Springtrap over Blitzo versus Pico, personally, but I'm aware that that's an opinion not very unique to myself, but is relatively uncommon. And finally from CG is Dilly. The one thing I'll say is Vault Boy versus Game & Watch is a definite number 1 for me. I think that's still my all-time favorite. Polybius versus Super Hot number 2 is valid. I would probably put Gabriel versus Operator at 3 then, and then 4 and 5 I think it makes sense. Yeah, I don't have anything I majorly disagree with. Next up is Eddie, who gave us like a joke top 5 list of editors, but also gave us a genuine list, so I'll look at that. His list of top 5 community editors goes Patrick, Rocco, Rabbi, Shmario, CJ. I think this is a very valid list. The only thing I would really change is I would personally swap out CJ for someone like Dan or RNG maybe. I think they're more overall competent editors. I think what CJ has to his strength is a lot of good storyboarding and a lot of great visual ideas. But if we want to talk about like who has the best editing ability, I probably would put RNG and Dan there over CJ. And now we have another top 5 editors list, this time from RNG. Yeah, you know what? I agree with this one more than Eddie's, I think. I think Rocco as a number one editor is probably the best pick. If not Patrick, I think. It's either Rocco or Patrick in my mind. Shimario, I think, lands closer to Rabbi and Dan than Rocco and Patrick personally. But I also absolutely understand, like, at a certain point, they're all just really great, and you can mix it up due to your own personal uh things that you like from each of them. Next up, we have a top five Benjamin rolls, which from Nugget. These almost all of these, like half of this list coming from Dustin, is interesting. Loch Ness as number one, I don't agree with. I think, if I had to place my number one Benjamin performance, I still think it is Nagito for Patrick specifically. A lot of people would go for Nagito for Dustin, but I think his Nagito in Patrick's battle is so much stronger. It's so much better. It's so much more there. Jevel is a valid inclusion. Oil Nam, or no, not Oil Nam, sorry. Henry, what's his face? Whatever that guy's name is, number one from Stranger Things. He's a valid pick, I suppose. I don't actually know, because he only does one verse, and it's kind of his voice, kind of not. It's just like it's a creepy version of his voice. So I actually don't know if I would include this. Varinger Caterpillar is pretty iconic. I understand putting that in your top five, absolutely. Same with Monokuma. He does pretty well with that. I am also actually surprised Rules Card is not on here. I reckon that would also be a pretty valid inclusion for top five. So I would probably swap out Stranger Things and Loch Ness for Nagito and Rules Card, respectively. Here we have Sham's top five DRB crew members. Number five is, you have number four. Number three and number two also kind of makes sense. I feel like number two, I actually, and number one, Sculpture. I see why. It's a sensible pick. It's a fairly, for some people, this is a fairly obvious pick. For others, it's like, it's a kind of controversial pick, if anything, but it is what it is. Now we have metas with a top five BOTMs, which I suppose is ranking the months on how competitive and interesting they were. We have March 2022, which I will always be a defender of. I think March 2022 was a phenomenal battle of the month to observe. It may not be the strongest in terms of the actual battles that came out, but the competition was definitely there and very interesting. April 2022, I don't remember that as well. Same with February. January of this year, I don't know if I agree. And then August, I do. I'll be honest, off the top of my head, I do not remember these very well. I assume that Aprils are always interesting because of how April Fool's shakes out, and that kind of competition will always be there. February of 2022 was, I believe, Tuesday, which did have a lot of interesting stuff come out, did make for a pretty interesting BOTM experience. And then August, I believe, was the 100-hour challenge. So, kind of correlates with a couple of events where a couple interesting things could have happened. We have another top five Dustin battles from 21 Cabbage this time. I think this is a pretty valid list. I think the top five battles all make sense. I would maybe reorder them a little. I feel like Edgar Wright versus Wes Anderson is really great with the characters, but I just think personally it just doesn't kind of stack up overall compared to some of the other ones you have featured here. And maybe that's because I'm a sucker for like big grand battles. So things like Robin Hood versus Guy Fawkes really work for me. Things like Frodo versus the Egyptians really works for me. But yeah, this is a fairly understandable top five list. Next, we have a top five DDLC battles, which is an interesting topic from Thanos Quack. I will firmly stand on this ground that not only is Sayori versus Noel the number one DDLC battle, period, it might be my number one battle from 2022, period. It is just magnificent. And the fact that Monica versus Harley is the one that beats it is really funny to me. It's I don't know. I think it's a bit outdated. I think Monica versus Harley doesn't really belong on this list. I think Natsuki versus Raven is actually one I whip on this list. I've been revisiting it. I think it's very catchy. I think it's very well written. Rabi's over Yuri versus Toko is a very interesting decision. I do like what Rabi went for a lot more than some other people did, but I think Yuri versus Toko is just more there altogether. And Monica versus Monica, absolutely fair number 5. Solid pick. We have a top 5 beat producers from JK. First off, no Epistra on the list, which is surprising. I understand why. I think Epistra's fallen out with a lot of the more recent battles just because their beat catalog isn't as large. But I don't know. I think Epistra deserves a spot on here. Danson is a fair enough number 1. I think, Danson, it's very hit or miss whether you can find what you're looking for. But if you do find what you're looking for, they are really solid. Same Eoxy. Same with that. A lot of what I'm finding is that all 5 of these have like catalogs where you really gotta search, but if you do find it, it's gonna hit. So I understand what you're going for there, and I think that's the same with a lot of beat producers, some more than others. But yeah, I think this is a perfectly fine list. If anything, I'd put Tone Jones above Hollywood Legend and Eoxy. I don't know about Anyway Well and Dancing though, So we have a list from Awesome Aiden, which is their top 5 ERBs. I'm surprised that hasn't come up yet. And looking at this list, it actually makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I would disagree with is the director's battle. I think the director's battle has 1, maybe 2 verses that are pretty solid to good, and then the rest range from interesting to meh. Putting it over Jordan versus Ali alone, I think is kind of crazy. We have a top 5 typecast also from Awesome Aiden here. Patrick as Kokichi, I don't think I need to really explain why I don't think that should be a typecast, but I'll tell you it shouldn't. Benjamin is Nagito, I think that's kind of obvious by now. I think he's proven his ability. Mancha as Sans, I think there are a lot of other really viable Sans voice actors. I don't think Mancha is as locked of a typecast as he necessarily it should be. But I do think Mancha provides a pretty solid Sans. I understand why it's a typecast for a lot of people. So this isn't a slight against Mancha's Sans. I just think that there are also other people who can do Sans. We have Cameron as Monokuma. Yeah, I mean, he's done it a couple times for a couple people. Makes sense. Feels obvious enough. And then Azia as Monica. Monica's a weird choice to give the Azia typecast to. I probably would have defaulted to Sayori over Monica, since I don't think she's played Monica all that many times overall. Theme Park Avenue had DM'd me a top 5 list through Discord. Is their top 5 ERBs, and this one's a little more, I suppose, on the interesting side. Steve Jobs versus Bill Gates number 1 is interesting. I think it's a very solid battle right until that HAL 9000 verse is where it all goes downhill. Bill Nye versus Isaac Newton. It's pretty good all the way through. I think number 2 is a bit strong. Theodore Roosevelt versus Winston Churchill makes sense. Philosophers makes sense. Michael Jackson versus Elvis Presley makes sense. And here MC Fawful has given their own top 5 DRB list. Red Mist Squidward versus LeBron James, number 1. Fair enough, makes sense. Polybius versus Virtual Boy, number 2, also makes sense. Arthur Fleck versus Fred, number 3, I agree. Number 4, Barnum versus McMahon is, interesting. I didn't think that a lot of people would like that battle as much as they do. And Kirby versus Galactus 2, I do think is still a top 5 DRB. I think it's pretty integral. And now we get to the number 1 most common subject brought up in the top 5 list, and one that I honestly should have expected there to be a lot of contention, is top 5 voice actors. There are so many names brought up. There are so many great talented people, and I will briefly explain why some people didn't make my top 5 list that I've seen in these lists, and then I will reveal my top 5 lists. People like Felix didn't make my list. I think he's a pretty talented VA. I don't know how strong his catalog is. A lot of them are probably boosted from Dustin battles, so he probably has a lot of Dustin rolls. Like I'm probably forgetting a good number of them. So if he's in your top 5 list, I think that's perfectly fair. I just think that, like, I don't know. For the most part, he does kind of play British guy a lot, or he just plays normal guy a lot. But he does have a pretty fun range. He can do Eric Cartman. His Wes Anderson's pretty fun. You know, he's done a couple impressions here and there, so he's definitely a good VA. Carrick also surprisingly doesn't make my top 5 list. I think Carrick just needs to show his ability as a rapper a bit more. I think kind of hit him with a role with more complex. He needs more roles with, like, you know, more complex, more out there flow. Really just go in, you know, and really kind of show what he is capable of. Alex and/or Iris was also a part of a lot of people's top 5. It's relatively same issue as well, actually. I think the modern day catalog is a bit lacking. I think that may be a bit of a bias thing. I do understand they have a lot of roles in the past that are probably pretty solid, but, you know, all in all, I think that, you know, they have a very solid range, and they've shown it a couple times, but it's never been in anything strong enough, or not never, but it hasn't been in as many strong projects to kind of push it into my personal top 5. I know Rocco was brought up in a couple people's list. I also think he's a pretty solid VA. He has a pretty good range. He has a pretty fun range. I do just think he might just need more roles. I don't know. I can't think of that many roles he's done on the whole, for me to confidently say that he's a top 5 VA. But he's probably a top 10 VA, for me. You know, there's a good chance for it. But yeah, he has a pretty solid catalog. He has a lot of fun roles. He has a lot of fun voices and all that. A similar argument, I think, could be made for Jesse, who, unfortunately to me, sounds like Jesse in every role now. I think that's kind of the community's thing of, like, they don't give Jesse enough roles that aren't Jesse. They always just kind of sound like Jesse, is the unfortunate thing. But I do think that they are a pretty strong VA. I think they have obviously a pretty good range. I just think they got to be given more roles where they don't sound like Jesse. Gonna quick fire through 3 more people who I think have a solid catalog and range, just don't quite make my personal top 5. Is Vinny, who has done a lot more fun roles recently and has always had, like, a couple really iconic roles to their name. Same with Dustin, who I think has a really great amount of roles. He has a very fun voice. But I don't know, I just kind of wish he had more roles. He's pretty exclusive to doing roles for other people, but I think when he does, he's pretty great. So he's very close to the top 5. And finally, Onway, actually, I like a lot as a VA. They haven't done that many roles, and they haven't really shown a crazy range, but almost every role they do, I find myself really enjoying it because they just have a really fun rapping voice. They're a really fun voice to listen to, and I think it's very nice. Anyways, now on to the top 5. My number 5 pick is going to be Oliver. I think he's had a lot of great roles recently. I think he's been on the up climb. I think he has a really long catalog, and I do think he's shown his ability. He's gotten in enough, you know, big roles, and he's gotten a good enough kind of range to where I can confidently say that he is a very good VA. So he is my number 5. As for my number 4, I'm gonna go Emily. She also has a great range. She also does a lot of great work. She has a lot of fun. She's one of the most fun VAs to have on your project. Maybe the most fun of my top 5 list. And yeah, she has a lot of fun. She kind of gets given crappy roles every now and then, or roles that don't fully kind of push her into what she can do, unfortunately. But she's gotten a lot of chances to show how great she is. And, you know, we love Em in this household. So M is at number 4. Number 3 is RNG, who is quickly becoming one of the community's favorite VAs. He has a great voice. He kind of kills the roles that he gets into. Almost every role I hear Calvin in, you know, everyone kind of loves what he does for it. He's never the bad performance, I feel, except for when he did Stan versus Zenny Wilkes, but we don't talk about that one. But yeah, Calvin's quickly building his catalog. He's quickly becoming a favorite VA. If he's your number one, I honestly would not disagree. Number two, I am going to say is Benjamin. I think Benjamin has maybe the most impressive catalog out of everyone on the top 5 list, maybe except for number one. But yeah, Benjamin has a crazy catalog. He is a pretty damn solid, actor, part of voice actor as well. He can obviously handle great flow. He gives himself a lot of roles, so he has a lot to play with. He does a lot. Turbox alone probably gives him like 5 or more iconic roles. Benjamin probably has the most amount of iconic roles. Anyone will probably say that Benjamin has like more iconic roles than anyone else in the community. That being said, I do think I have to give my number one VA spot to Azia. Azia, to my understanding, does not miss. There might be a role or two in the catalog of everyone I've mentioned where you might not really like what they did, or you thought that it was a bit underwhelming all in all. But I don't think there's a single underwhelming Azia role, and I am I don't know how willing I am to stand that ground, but I think she is absolutely amazing. She also has a lot of iconic roles under her name. She kind of steals the show a lot of the time, and I just think she is one of the strongest voices, one of the strongest actors, has clearly shown her rapping ability in a lot of battles and all that. Azia is just like a fantastic all-in-all VA that I think might be the best VA in the entire community. And that, I believe, wraps up today's Let's Argue. If I missed your tweet or your list that is on me, I'll give you a $5 coupon to IHOP for that one. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought of my opinions. Let me know your own opinions in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If all goes well, I have a review also being posted today. So we're back to those as well. So, we're officially back. This isn't just like a one-time thing for fun. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. And Raffiney Battletano forever.